Welcome back to Ozarks Tonight. Support for President Trump amongst Republicans has started to slip over the past few days. We saw evidence of that in the Nexstar Emerson poll that was released last week. Colin Powell is the latest prominent member of the party that has turned his back on the president. Powell announcing that he will support former Vice President Joe Biden in the upcoming presidential election. Our political analyst, Dr. Brian Calfano, is joining us today. Brian, good to have you as always. So does this recent trend that we are seeing spell possible trouble for the president heading toward November?
I have said, John, a few times when we've talked about this, because it's an evolving situation, that it really would be much more of an issue for the president if we were in the middle of October and you had everybody sort of looking for the exits. The thing of it is, the president has still a good amount of time in all of this. I mean, we're talking, this is the beginning of the summer, really. We haven't had the convention yet, in whatever form that takes. We haven't had the debates yet. There's so much time left for the president to sort of pull this up and away from whatever mountain he might crash into politically, that I don't know that this necessarily spells the end for President Trump. And beyond that, you got to look at the constituencies that these defecting Republicans have. I'm not really sure there is a constituency for Colin Powell in the modern Republican Party. I think when he broke with voting for John McCain and decided that he was going to support Barack Obama, that may have been fine for his personal political viewpoint, but that didn't really win him a lot of points within the Republican establishment. So I'm not sure that this has that much of an impact among committed Republicans. Certainly, you've got independents out there who might respect General Powell and who might say, well, you know, if he's given this a second thought in terms of supporting President Trump, then maybe I should as well. And that's always the big question. We talked about this last week when it came to the Emerson poll. How many independents are going to defect, had voted for President Trump in 2016, but decided to defect in 2020 and vote for Joe Biden? But President Trump's done a good job of remaking the Republican Party over his term. And there are a lot of folks now who support President Trump who are not part of committed Republican networks. They're not part of that Republican Party circle. They didn't grow up going to the Chamber of Commerce meetings and all those sorts of things. So they're not necessarily swayed by these Republican defections in the same way you might expect a more traditional Republican president might be.
And when you talk about President Trump, some of the most memorable images that we see from him are the large campaign rallies. And recently, earlier this afternoon, it was reported that the president plans to pick those up here in the next 2 weeks. He's going to once again hold rallies. We don't know as of right now what that looks like, if they're going to be at limited capacity to what they were when everything was paused due to COVID-19. You know, how would that impact the re-election bid going forward here in 2020 for the president, being able to go out on the road again and do what he really seems like he enjoys and what he is better at and really fires up support doing those large rallies? And how does that affect the former vice president? You know, he has been, laying low to a degree since COVID-19 came about. How does this possibly affect the race going forward?
Well, the strategy that the White House wanted to pursue before COVID kind of came upon us was to what you might call kneecap Joe Biden as early as possible back in the spring, and to essentially paint him as an out-of-touch person who's far to the left and tries to pretend to be a moderate and all the sorts of things you might imagine Republican candidates talking about when it comes to a Democratic challenger. They obviously couldn't do that back in February and March, and they missed a big chance, obviously, because everything was shut down with COVID. So now the president gets to get out there, and really this is his lifeblood. I mean, going out and doing the sort of things that he does in these rallies and to generate the kind of media coverage that he tries to generate, free publicity in many of the markets where he visits. This is what the president uses, in addition to Twitter, to get that message out and to galvanize people and get them committed, if they're not already committed, get them contributing to the campaign in some way, whether that be trying to convince people to vote for President Trump who didn't otherwise or who have not voted before. That's a big number of people who have not voted in these elections who might be brought out because they're worried about things like defunding the police, right? These sorts of far left viewpoints that are put out there and that really don't have a lot of traction even among Democrats, but are getting a lot of media attention right now because of all the controversy over police interactions with African Americans in these cities. So there's lots of play in this in terms of what President Trump can do when it comes to getting back out on the campaign trail. But the biggest thing that he can do when he gets out there, John, is, and this gets back to the first question about the defecting Republicans, is to define what it means to be a Republican and to be a conservative in the year 2020. Years ago, when Ronald Reagan was in the White House, Peggy Noonan, who now is a media contributor and works for the Wall Street Journal, wrote a book that talked about what she saw at this Reagan revolution. And she essentially said that there were critics of President Reagan who, at the time, said the president wasn't, quote, conservative enough. And Noonan's response to that in this book, it's brilliant and it's true. It's basically saying, look, I'm the president of the United States. I get to decide what is and is not conservative. You all may have your own views, but I'm the one who's running, I'm the nominee, and I'm the incumbent president, right? So this is the same thing that President Trump looks at now. He's able to essentially define the parameters of what it means to be a conservative and a Republican in 2020. That may look vastly different from what George Will, Bill Kristol, and Colin Powell think ought to be the standard bearer for their party, but there will be millions more folks who step behind the president in lockstep and support him for this reelection bid. So again, I think it's really too early for there to be a large negative impact on President Trump at this point. He just has too much time to recover. If the economy looks like it's on the upswing, if those job numbers continue to solidify, I think we're back to where we were at the beginning of the year with the president looking like he's in some pretty decent shape to at least have a 50-50 chance of getting reelected in November.
All right, and it's hard to believe, Brian, we're only 5 months away from the election of 2020. It is coming down the road here pretty soon. Our political analyst, Dr. Brian Calfano. Brian, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thanks, John.
We'll be back with more Ozarks Tonight right after this.